13. How come there are grape leaves on your papaya plant? 2 months after the first prim and proper-looking shoots came up in a pot carefully labeled papaya, the plants reached the gouki stage. Gangly and long-stemmed, they just looked too tall for their leaves. It was autumn, and a northern window no longer coaxed in the lazy sun. They are stretching for light, I thought. Poor things. I propped them up with a chopstick. After waiting 6 months for those shoots, I was taking every precaution against illness and injury. Another month passed. Thoughtfully, I added another chopstick on top. Straight on up they grew. Soon they were 3 scotch-taped chopsticks high, and the leaves were no bigger. I remained undaunted. The papaya, though tree-sized at maturity, is not a tree but a large perennial herb. It doesn't branch off the way trees usually do, more closely resembling the banana in its growing pattern, except it grows taller and the crown from which the leaves sprout rises with the tip of the plant. Since the new leaves, even if nowhere near the size I had expected to see by now, were green at the crown and healthy, I was confident if I could only keep the plants struggling along through the winter, they would fill out in the first warmth and sunshine of spring. I hadn't counted on Susan's observant eye. Returning to the apartment from a Sunday afternoon in the country, she strolled purposefully over to the papaya pot and inspected it closely. Then she turned with an impish grin. "How come there are grape leaves on your papaya plant?" she asked. "Actually, every house should have a grapevine or two by the window. They climb quickly and gracefully and can be trained to edge the window frame with a green leafy border. Granted, my temperate grapevines were a little out of place in the window jungle, but that had bothered neither them nor me until I'd found out they were interlopers. Somehow the window would no longer seem complete without their long brown vines. After all, one can't swing Tarzan style from here to there without a proper liana looping around among the mangoes and avocados. Anyhow, they were already growing, poor clinging vines doing no one but the stooping scotch-taped chopsticks any harm. I couldn't bring myself to wantonly throw them out. Besides, they might bear grapes. The grapevine is one of the most widespread of fruit bearers in the temperate zones. Even before man's crossings of the ocean, either direction, it was growing in profusion in both Europe and North America. That's a safe bet without going into the debate on who actually discovered America, something I'd rather not get involved in here, since being Scandinavian, I'd have to opt for Leif Erikson, and this chapter would grow out of bounds. Whoever it was, Columbus, Erikson, or anybody earlier, the grapevine, although a different species than that in Europe, was here too when he or they arrived, maybe even under cultivation. In excavations of Swiss villages dating from the Bronze Age, grape seeds have been found under such circumstances implying cultivation. Grape and wine production records were kept in hieroglyphics as early as the 4th century Egyptian time, 2400 BC. It would appear both these ancient vineyard regions cultivated a grape of excellent taste, the Vitis vinifera, originating around the Caspian Sea. The consequences still has it the best grape of all, particularly for wine production, even in today's age of improved hybrids. The V. vinifera being the superior species, American grape growers naturally wanted to cultivate this European variety at home, so they imported vast quantities from France. A Native American plant Laos, the Phylloxera, however, did not see eye to eye with the growers and promptly destroyed all the V. vinifera. Then, to add insult to injury, the Laos shipped out and just as promptly destroyed all the grapevines in Europe, at which point the American growers ended up shipping their native vines over to Europe. The American species, over no doubt long years of struggle, had developed an immunity to the harassment of this pest. So when you come right down to it, that imported European grape is just coming home. Only, of course, the varying environment of sun, rain, and soil in different parts of Europe does put a different stamp on American vines living there. Besides which, European growers were not to be consoled with American grapes. They grafted what they could salvage of their own stock onto the disease-resistant American roots. To be really accurate about it, then you'd have to say what they've got now is a European grape with American roots. But none of this need trouble the owner of the homegrown grapevine. I've never had any lice on my vines, and given a window to wander up, they adapt themselves to a wide variety of soil conditions, even accidental ones. My first grapevines sprouted from errant seeds. The window cleaner knocked over an open jar in which I had been drying some seeds. They were waiting their turn for planting. At the moment, there was no vacancy on the ledge. Susan picked up most of them with the vacuum cleaner, and I scooped the rest of the sill into my hands. Nevertheless, they are small, and a number of them had scattered into assorted pots. By the time Susan pointed out that there were, in fact, incipient grapevines and not papayas in the papaya pot, they had sprouted among the mangoes and pineapples too. So it seems almost any soil will do for grapes. Although fertilizer should be added to poor soil, with grapes there's no worry about it being too loamy, too sandy, or too clayish. The plants will keep growing anyway. For the biggest and best plant, however, I use 2/3 potting soil to 1/3 humus. Digging out my first grapevines carefully from the pots they had strayed into, I put them all in with the Arsuds papaya. The idea was that the soil mixture for the papaya, which seemingly was not going to put in an appearance in that pot at any rate, had been made up particularly rich, and so with regular fertilization could support a number of vines. Indeed it did. Not at all sure I would arrive at a full gourmet selection of grape clusters starting out this way, I later started a pot sown with more precision, scattering maybe a dozen seeds from different types of grapes, blue, red, and green, and covering them with about an 1/8 inch of humus. Having gone in for grapes, I might as well select, not settle. The various vines would climb up different ways maybe. They'd certainly have differently shaped leaves and tend to drop their leaves at different times, thus giving an all-around lushness to my window border. A mature grapevine thrives on sun, preferring long, dry, warm to hot summers. But while a window with direct sunlight will produce the most luxuriant vines, I've still gotten 8 to 10 foot vines in 2 years in a north window. A young vine, as opposed to its big brother, should not be exposed to more than 2 hours of direct sunlight a day. It might get sunburned. Once a vinery group is 6 inches or so tall, add another 1/4 inch of humus to the pot. Also cover the soil with any extra fallen leaves you might have around. Give young grapes a stake to climb. This is essential. Grapevines grow faster if they can climb up. When there is nothing for their tendrils to grasp, the vines droop over and run along the ground, always trying to reach up. If after growing horizontally for a while, they still fail to find something to latch onto to lift themselves, they will simply give up and stop growing. Susan gave my vines green yarn to grow up last Christmas. It made an excellent ladder strung crisscross at the side of a bay window. I tried to guide the vines up diagonally rather than letting them grow straight up. They can be coaxed this way, but for some strange reason they bulk absolutely at twining downward. They simply won't grow upside down, although turning them topsy-turvy sometimes will make them send out new shoots farther down the main vine, producing a thicker, more lush border. More usually, however, they stop growing altogether until the following season. Many tropical plants have a resting period when there is no noticeable growth. It is brief, usually lasting only a month or so. Temperate zone plants like the grape, on the other hand, may rest as long as 5 months. Once fall comes, the changes outdoors are noticeable enough to the house grapevine to make it have thoughts of reverting to nature. Once fall comes, the changes outdoors are noticeable enough to the house grapevine to make it have thoughts of reverting to nature. Growing indoors, the grapevine often remains green year-round, but sometimes it will stop growing come winter. If the leaves change color and wither, it is an easy matter to trim the plant down and keep it in hibernation till spring. Besides, they usually turn more slowly indoors, adding a colorful, speckled red foliage to a window jungle late into autumn. For maximum growth the next year, the vines should be cut back whether the leaves turn or not. In the case of the grape, don't be afraid to do a lot of cutting. Take off as much as 80%, leaving only 10 to 12 inches above ground. While it is hibernating, water the plant as usual or perhaps just a little bit less. Left to my own devices and having acquired by laissez-faire means several handsome 9-foot vines without cutting back, I would tend to let things be. For while pruning might make grapevines grow faster next year, without cutting back they overgrow the window this year. Which is why I suppose last year for my birthday, Susan gave me a small machete. There were no instructions, but I took the hint and pruned the plants a bit.